I'm James Rule. Welcome to the Lonely Leader podcast, where we help existing and aspiring leaders find clarity, build resilience, drive performance, and enhance fulfillment. The focus of today's episode is the traits of courageous leaders. Now, you may have heard my episode on the leadership essential of courage. There's a whole raft of traits that I believe the best leaders need to embrace and incorporate into their leadership style, and courage is undoubtedly one of them. So today's episode gives me the chance to just articulate some of the elements of best practice that I've seen working with high-performing leaders in different sectors around the world. One of the undoubted blessings of my role is I get to coach and mentor people. And yes, I am trying to impart my knowledge and wisdom to support them, but equally, I am continually learning myself. I see things that work, I see things that don't work, and the beauty of the exposure to the best practice that I witness is I can incorporate that into my proverbial knowledge library. And that's content and wisdom and insight that I can then draw upon to support clients, whether that's in a mentoring capacity, coaching, or on some of the training programs that we deliver. And so these traits are very much a unifying theme that I see time and again in high-performing leaders. So number one, they say what needs to be said. Now, I'm not going to overly elaborate this. I just want you to reflect on leaders that you have worked with, maybe you continue to work with. They just have an ability to say what needs to be said. They don't get bogged down, worried about how will this be perceived and what is the right thing to say to endear myself to this particular stakeholder or that particular client or that particular customer. They just do the right thing. They say what needs to be said. They call the proverbial spade a spade. And if there's an issue that needs addressing, they are the ones who are willing to step forward as a leader and bring that issue out and onto the table. Number two, they are comfortable being challenged. Now, I don't mean physically challenged, but having their opinions, their thoughts, their strategy challenged. It's very easy to allow our ego to come to the fore when any of those ideas or concepts are challenged. But the best leaders have the courage to step back, to put their ego to one side. Even if this is in an open forum, even if this is witnessed by a diverse range of staff, customers, clients, etc., rather than feel a need to defend yourself or defend your ideas, the most courageous leaders have an ability to wait, to listen, to assess the merit of what's being said, and then have the courage to course correct, to adapt their strategy. It's very rare that any leader is going to have the monopoly on all the ideas. They will need to have that willingness to adapt. They will need to encourage innovation and contribution from their team. So it is turning off that flow of information if they feel the need to challenge anybody that challenges their ideas. Now, that's not to say that they're constantly flipping and flopping and they present an idea or a strategy, and just because somebody challenges it, they change it, and then somebody challenges it again, so they change it again. It's not as simplistic as that. It's the overarching principle that they are willing to be challenged. They are not embarrassed to be challenged. Quite the contrary, they encourage it because they know that is a way to strength test their ideas and strategy, and they quite regularly will stay on the exact same track and plan, but they've had a chance to test it with the feedback of their team. And also, as I alluded to earlier, they're equally comfortable to make changes and to adapt. Number three, they take responsibility for failure. Now, every leader listening to this will have had a situation where somebody in their team has made a mistake, has compromised their business, has done something with negative ramifications. Perhaps it's internal, perhaps it's on a larger scale and it's external and it's viewed by customers, it's viewed by the wider stakeholder group. Now, once again, ego and pride can get in the way, and it's easy to try and deflect criticism and flack and leave that at the door of the individual who made the mistake. But that's not what courageous leaders do. They never throw anybody under the bus. They accept that they sit at the top, and if mistakes are made within their team, within their organization, then the responsibility always starts and ends with them. And this, when it's implemented, endears a huge amount of loyalty and support from their staff. When people see their leader step into the proverbial line of fire and take the criticism and the flack and the negativity that wasn't of their making, then naturally it endears the team to that particular leader. Number 4, give credit to others. This is another trait of courageous leaders, and naturally it ties into the previous point. An insecure leader can be tempted to take the good performance, the new ideas, the innovation from their team, and try and pass them up the chain of command to their superiors and take credit for those ideas. It's a very short-term and deluded strategy, in my opinion. People above the leader will very quickly come to realize that they are passing off other people's ideas for their own, and they will lose credibility as a consequence. And without a shadow of a doubt, the people beneath the leader in their wider team will also recognize that their leader is taking other people's ideas and passing it off as their own. So, however tempting it may be, there really is no upside for engaging in that particular course of action. On the contrary, when you are giving credit where it's due, when you pass information up the chain of command and let people know where it originated from, a great idea from this individual or that individual, it endears you in the exact opposite way that the previous strategy alienated you. So the people above you admire the fact that you are looking after your team, praising them where praise is due, and your team have a stronger sense of loyalty and affinity with you because they can see you are taking your own interests out of the agenda and you are happily promoting their performance and their innovation to the senior hierarchy within an organization. On a slight tangent, we live in a world where workers are increasingly transient. The old-fashioned model of people staying at an organization for 25 plus years and receiving a retirement gift are pretty much redundant. Yes, there is still long service. Yes, people, where they are being fulfilled and where they are growing and developing, will stay in organizations for the long term. But it is far more common to see people moving between organizations. And these softer elements, these traits of leadership, are imperative to not only attract, but crucially to retain the best quality performers. Once you start alienating them by, to my earlier point, apportioning blame and publicly criticizing people for their mistakes, or on the most recent point, taking other people's ideas and passing them off as your own, then you really are starting the spin of the revolving door. You will have people leaving your organization and you will struggle to build the sort of culture where high performers thrive and remain a part of your business for the longer term. Point number 5, quickly address performance issues. Now, this aligns with the first point, saying what needs to be said. It's all too easy to ignore the elephant in the room. No team are perfect. At any given time, some people will be performing well and some people will be falling below the standard expected. And it's not easy as a leader to deal with performance issues, but deal with them you must if you want to have the right culture and the right environment for your people to thrive. Because once you start turning a blind eye to poor performance, then standards fall away. Because people start to think that you're playing favorites, that you will hold some people to task, but allow others to fall below the necessary standard. So the best leaders that I've worked with have the courage to deal with any and all performance issues when they see them occurring. There is no favoritism. There is no time lag. It doesn't matter who it is, whether you are a long-standing, most experienced member of staff or a new hire, whether you have arrived a week ago or been here for 5 years. All those parameters are irrelevant. The most courageous leader will deal with the issues that need to be dealt with. Point number 6, willing to make tough decisions. Decisiveness and the ability to make tough decisions are themes that will pop up in a number of the episodes on the Lonely Leader podcast. And that's because it is such a central facet of leadership. You have to make decisions. Invariably, you're making numerous decisions each and every single day. That is the job of a leader. And being decisive requires courage, particularly when you operate in a public-facing role. I spent a lot of time in sport, and anybody that's operating in a leadership role in sport knows that the second you make a decision, it's going to be examined. It's going to be examined by stakeholders on social media. It's going to be examined in print, digital media, etc. And that's the same in other sectors. In politics is another area where decisions are forensically examined. And that sort of scrutiny can make people drift into procrastination, to aspire to get as much intelligence as possible because they know full well that as soon as they've made a decision, people will examine it, and invariably they'll examine it in the future with the benefit of hindsight, with intelligence that you didn't have at the time you made the decision. But unfortunately, that's not real life. And if you wait to gather the full array of intelligence, you will invariably compromise performance of your team, of your wider organization, because you're trapped in procrastination. So it takes real courage to step forward, make a decision, knowing it might not necessarily be the wrong one, and that invariably you will be exposed to criticism by people who can access information that you didn't have at the point at which you made the decision. But the only way through that is to keep walking forwards, to trust yourself that more often than not, you will make the right decision. And if indeed you make a wrong decision, you will have the ability to course correct. You will have the ability to assess the new intelligence and do the best to take a new decision to put things back on the right track. Now, that sounds very simple, but it isn't the easiest thing. And I'm sure we've all been there. We spend too long over a decision because of its significance. And in leadership, those tough decisions come at you thick and fast. You have to make them, move forward, and then based on the intelligence that comes to the fore, make the next set of decisions. Number 7, staying visible and accessible. Now, we've all heard that adage, the open door policy. It's something I foolishly probably said a bit too much in the early days of my tenure as a chief executive, and the door was forever open with people popping in and out with questions and queries. So I think it's wise to have an open door policy, but I'm not saying that there are no boundaries and that to be accessible, you have to just be open all day, every day, because in reality, you'll drown in overwhelm and you'll end up doing all of your work on an evening once you've finished answering all the questions and queries. But what it does mean, particularly in times of adversity, is allowing people to draw strength from your accessibility. You may have been in an environment where the boss is behind a closed door for the entire day. You can't get to him, you can't see her, there is no access, you have no idea what they're thinking or what their plans are. Actually, just the simple walk around, people seeing you in the office environment, even if they're not necessarily talking with you to any great degree, people draw strength from your positive body language, from your very presence. Equally, in times of adversity, it's important for people to be able to get access and appreciate the scale of an organization. Not every employee is going to be able to step through the CEO's door, but at the very least, the senior management, the senior leadership team need accessibility, because they then become the deliverers of feedback and information cascading from their leader into the wider organization. So at times of adversity, having that positive presence, having that accessibility is something that leaders do well. And it takes a bit of courage, because sometimes you do just want to lock yourself away so you can have clear, uninterrupted thought onto what to do next. You don't necessarily want to debate and discuss every element of what's taking place. But as a leader, stepping into those uncomfortable scenarios, being willing to have those conversations is a phenomenal trait. If you can bring that to the fore consistently, you will really gain the respect and enhance levels of trust from your people. Point number 8, lead through change. We're in a fast-paced, seemingly ever-changing world. Leadership's never easy, but it's relatively easy if the status quo is maintained. If every day is the same, all your plans come to fruition, every strategy hits a home run, but that's not the real world. And change is all around us. So the best leaders have the courage to say, okay, this change is frenetic. I don't have all the answers, but I'm on deck, I'm present, I'm accessible, as we alluded to earlier, and I will continue to lead. It ties a lot of the previous points together. I will continue to make decisions. I will continue to move myself and the wider team forward. So it's easy to retreat in the face of a lot of change, to crave the certainty and the status quo. It takes a bit of courage to say, there are lots of things I can't control taking place, but I will lead and I will focus on the things that I can control and strive to keep moving us forward. Point number 9, communicate openly and frequently. I've talked in previous episodes about hoarding information. I don't quite know why this happens. I think it's to give a sense of control. It's feeding into people's egos. It can be quite manipulative. And like many of the things we've talked about in this episode, it can strike at the very fabric of the culture of an organization if people think you are withholding information. So being able to convey everything that's going on, to pass on intelligence you have as a leader that's come down from your superiors into your wider team, and vice versa, take information from the ground floor of the organization and pass that up. It's an essential role, being that conduit of information. If people sense you're not being open in your communication, that you're holding things back, again, we lose trust. It damages the culture. And once the culture starts to fall away, as we said earlier, you have a revolving door of departing talent. Frequency is also important as well. The bigger the organization, I fully appreciate, the harder it is to get the right cadence, the right frequency of communication. But you have to strive for frequency. If people only ever hear your thoughts, your plans, intermittently, once a month, quarterly, then there's no real connection. So it's hard in a big organization. I appreciate that, but you have to ensure that you are reaching as wider cross-section of the organization. Yes, you will have your senior management, your senior team that lead into you, but are you certain that information is cascading all the way down the organization? Sometimes that frequency serves you to have different touch points through the different levels of your organization. You might have small groups representative of different areas of the business that come together periodically, just so that, tied into our previous point, they have access to you, but into this point of frequency and accessibility of information, then they get to hear from their leader. And of course, they then take that information out and cascade it into the wider footprint of the organization. And like a lot of these points, there is overlap. Naturally, there is. They're not silos. A lot ebb and flow with previous points. So this one very much ties into the accessibility point. It's easy to communicate openly and frequently when everything's going well. But when you hit a bump in the road, a difficult period of trading, a period of adversity in your sector, being seen, being present, and staying connected to your people through your communication, through the openness of that communication and its frequency, is a very, very galvanizing, reassuring, positive impact on your team. Conversely, when the leader retracts, disappears, is no longer present, no longer communicating, no longer accessible, then that then has the converse. It creates panic, fear, uncertainty, which undermines collective performance and strikes at the culture of the organization. And last but not least, point number 10, hold themselves to account. It's very easy as a leader to think, right, well, I've made it. I'm at the summit. My job's all about managing, looking around me, serving the stakeholder group, managing my staff, holding them to account, making sure they meet the standards of behavior and performance that I want as the leader. All of that is true. But equally, the best leaders also hold themselves to account. They recognize that they will not get their performance right day in, day out. There will be gaps that become identifiable within their knowledge. They need to take the steps to fix them. That might be training, that might be coaching, that might be going on certain courses, but they know that at any given point, they will need to continue to invest in their own growth and development. And if their performance starts to dip, they will have trusted mentors or guides or colleagues that they can go to and have the courage to show some vulnerability and to say, I'm struggling a little bit in this area. And by showing that vulnerability, they then have an ability to set out a plan of action, something that is going to help them improve and address those issues. Now, that takes a bit of courage to be able to step forward and say, I need some help. I'm not quite performing here. I've got a gap in my knowledge. I made a decision that didn't quite work out. I need to reflect on what got us to this point. And the best leaders have the courage to do that. So there we are, 10 traits of courageous leaders. I'm sure as you listen to these, a lot of them will be relevant to you. A lot of them you will already be embodying and displaying in your leadership style. And I imagine there may be one or two that you think, yeah, I could possibly improve in those areas. And that, as I say, week in, week out on the Lonely Leader podcast is the raison d'etre for what I'm doing. I'm hoping that I am prompting reflection that you can take away and implement to enhance your professional performance and ultimately enhance your fulfillment. Thanks for listening to the Lonely Leader podcast. I'd be very grateful if you could share and follow if the content resonates. And if you're looking for additional free resource to support your continued growth and development, then please do check out our social media and website details in the show notes. Remember, quality leadership on the outside must always start within.